Hello dear viewers, welcome back to Gleave Makes. In this video we're going to be utilising Google Maps Satellite View, 3D CAD and 3D printing to create an accurate scale model of a real-life railway station's platforms. This is an interesting technique that I've not seen used elsewhere, and it's going to be super useful to me because I'm creating a model railway which is heavily inspired by a real-life railway station, Bourne End in Buckinghamshire. So if this seems like something that's interesting to you, then let's jump straight in. Okay, so here we are on Google Maps, and you can see that we're hovering above the Bourne End railway station, but obviously we want to actually see what we're doing. So I'm going to come down here to the bottom left and I'm going to change it to satellite view, and this is really where this technique shines. So you can see with Bourne End we've got two tracks that are coming down here, and then obviously the emergent one to go over the bridge, and then another that goes off towards Marlow. But obviously what we're focusing on primarily is the platform layout. Now you can see the platform is very long coming down to here at the end, but obviously we're not going to be making our platforms that long, and obviously there's fine details and stuff that are going to need to change depending on what you need for your layout. But to make a start, the best thing to do really is to get as much as the platform in frame as possible, because what we're going to rely on is the tracks being nice and visible for making sure that we get this accurate. So I'm going to worry about the bottom end of the platform a little later, but hovering directly over sort of the main area like this, obviously we can try and rotate the view to get it sort of as flat as we can, but in reality, I mean, that's about as good as we can get. But this main area is the most important. I'm going to use the snipping tool, and the shortcut for that is Windows, Shift and S, and then I'm going to draw a box around as much as I can of the station, and then you'll see in the bottom right corner we get this option to click the image and then save it. The next thing I'm going to do is to make sure I get the size of the ramps accurately. I'm going to do another snip, and I'm going to just grab that image there. That's all we really need at this current time, so we can head straight into Fusion 360 and we can get ready to start modelling our platforms. The first step, and this is a feature that is in a lot of different CAD programs, not just Fusion 360, is to insert what's called a canvas. Now I'm going to click this button up here above the Insert tab, and you can see that I get an option to insert from my computer. I'm going to navigate to where those pictures are stored, and then I'm going to start by just importing Demo 1. I'm going to insert it on the top plane here, so basically it's on the quote-unquote floor, and then I'm going to navigate the cube, so I'm looking at it from a bird's eye view. And what I'm going to try and do, to the best of my ability, and again it doesn't matter too much, but rotate the canvas so that the tracks, at least a portion of the tracks, are relatively horizontal. Now again, with this snip of Bourne End, as you can see here, the tracks and the platforms are curved. Obviously I'm not going to be doing that for my straight layout. However, if you want that ultra realism, you can of course copy that, which I'm going to show you first of all. Once we've got a section of the track relatively flat, then what I'm going to do is literally just drop roughly in the center of where the world is going to be, so you can see the origin point is there, and then I'm going to hit OK. The next thing to do is do this little drop down menu on the canvases, right click on Demo 1, which is the image, and then press Calibrate. I'm going to zoom in to the rails here, and to the best of my ability I'm going to click the inside of one rail and the inside of the opposite rail and set that to 16.5 in millimeters obviously. This is going to actually increase quite dramatically the size of this image, but what it's done is it's made the tracks in the picture exactly 00 gauge, which is 16.5 millimeters between the rails. Now what we've done is we've calibrated the image to be perfectly the correct size. Now it's time to start drawing out our platforms. Now this technique only really works for stations that aren't covered. So obviously if you're thinking of doing a big station in London that's got a massive roof over it, obviously this probably isn't going to work for you. But for a platform like Bourne End, where most of it is uncovered, you can see that basically the second platform over here and most of this is completely uncovered, and the area underneath the building we can make some valid assumptions as to, you know, where the lines are going and where they stop. Just quickly, I'm going to demonstrate, as promised, how you're going to replicate the exact curves and everything of this platform, and then I'm going to show you the technique that I personally use to straighten out this platform. What you're going to want to do is come up to the sketch button and then again click the top plane, and that's going to enter us into sketch mode. Now if you want to replicate these curves perfectly, we have a couple of options. We can utilize the spline tool, which, if anyone knows Photoshop, basically allows you to click on specific points and it will effectively produce a line that follows those curves, as you can see. At any point I can switch off demo 1 and it can reveal exactly what I've got. At the end of the spline I'm going to just draw a line up, and the actual specific measurements don't matter too much at this point, but of course, you know, we can refine them as we go. So you can see by clicking along the points that, you know, clicking along various points that are, you know, the edges of the platforms, I've now got roughly the shape of where the track bed is between the platforms. However, to straighten out the image and basically make it so that it's appropriate for my layout, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stick with the line tool. Now the line tool allows me to obviously draw perfectly straight lines, and I'm going to make a start by choosing a point somewhere on this image that is, you know, a solid corner reference point. In this case I'm going to start right here. You can zoom in as much as you want and try and make it accurate, but effectively what I'm going to be doing is drawing a straight line. Now I'm going to make this straight line, let's say, to begin with at least 500 millimeters. What we can do is click this point, the corner where we started, right click and then press fix, and what that's going to do is it's going to fix that point in space, because before we hadn't anchored it to anything, and it's important to make sure that when we start drawing other lines and changing the dimensions, it's not going to mess stuff about. I'm then going to repeat that process by drawing a line upwards, and we're not going to worry about the specific other corner because obviously we can't see it, and then I'm going to draw another line, make it equal to the opposite one, and then we can basically drag the line up and down until we're satisfied at which, you know, we have the correct width of what the track bed is going to be. Now what I like to do is add my dimensions on here, so as I go I'm constraining the sketch. So in this case I'm going to just round it down to 78 millimeters. Now you can see the further we get down we come away from the edge of the platform. Again, if that bothers you, you can do the previous technique with the spline tool, or you can just sort of do it roughly based on this. In this specific case, because we've got the correct width of the track bed according to our roughly 16.5 track gauge, then obviously if we draw straight lines perpendicular to that, then we're effectively translating a curved platform to be perfectly straight. What I'm going to do now is then I'm going to start tracing the rest of the platform, and again in some areas we're going to have to make some assumptions. If we come down here we can see that we've got this little ramp that goes down to the car park for wheelchair users, so that the platforms are accessible and the station is accessible for people from the car park. And if we come up to the top we've got another ramp at the back of here behind the station building. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to completely trace that area. I'm going to come down to here and I'm going to come up to the edge of the ramp. Now at the moment I'm not going to include any ramps because we're going to be making flat platform sections, and then we'll add our ramps in as separate parts afterwards. So again I'm just clicking, making sure my lines are staying horizontal. In Bornen's case you can see that we've got a road that comes sort of at an angle past here, and it's got this strange little sort of triangular section of the platform there, and that's fine, we can obviously work around that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a line up at an angle. I'm not going to worry too much about, you know, the specific size of it or the angle or anything like that at the moment. I'm then going to do another horizontal line, and of course it's sort of up to you, you know, the width between the building and the edge of the platform. In this case it's 28.93 millimeters, and of course you can increase that. Based on this view we can sort of see the front edge of the building is just roughly about here, but then obviously the roof comes down like this, So again, it's really up to you depending on what platform that you've got and what station building that you've got. In my case, I've bought the, I think it was a Pico country station kit, and I'm going to show you how I sort of make my accommodations for that in a minute. I'm going to come straight up right to the edge where this sort of wall is, and then I'm going to continue following the contours of our station. Now as it stands, we're not going to worry right in this second about how big this whole platform is, because obviously I'm not going to be able to 3D print this in one go, but I'm going to show you obviously then how we can trim that down later on. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go around and constrain the sketch. Now I'm not too worried about the specific dimensions of anything. Of course, if you want to, agonize over the details of, how wide a ramp should be for people in a wheelchair and stuff, that's absolutely fine. But I'm just going to do it quickly based off of this image. So again, now looking from a bird's eye view, you can see that we've basically roughly, but I would also argue very accurately, recreated the platform where you can actually stand from Bourne End train station. We can at any point again switch off our canvas and we can actually see the sort of area that we've created, and I can switch that back on just to view what we're looking at. Now in my case, I've got the Pico, I keep calling it Pico, I'm not 100% sure, but I got the Pico country station, and I took some measurements of how big that is roughly, and I'm just going to demonstrate that here. Now you've got a couple of options. If you want like super accuracy, then what we could do is just literally draw a line from here and then straight down, which is what I'm going to do in this specific case just to demonstrate. So you can see that effectively we've got a box now where the station platform is. Now that would be useful obviously if you're going to be recreating that building exactly. Now in my case, again like I say, I've got the Pico station platform. Now what I did for the previous example that I showed at the start of the video is I actually measured it and sort of marked out roughly where I wanted it to be to make sure it would fit. And of course, you could create a box that's the right dimension and make sure it's correctly spaced and that sort of thing, giving you enough floor space if that's what you need. In this case though, I'm going to leave it as it is. I'm going to just create this sort of box where the station building is going to be. So as it stands now, this is the whole platform, okay? We can extend from this end as much as we like, and likewise here, we can trim it down, we can make any adjustments that we need. In my case, because I'm using set track, the actual width between these two tracks is different. It's actually a bit wider. So what I did on my version is I actually just basically split this and made the gap bigger based on the gap between the two tracks. Of course, those are adjustments that you can make if you want to. What we're going to do now is we're going to switch off demo 1 so we can't see it, because we can start now actually turning this into 3D. Most sources online say that platforms for double-O gauge monorailway should be 12 mil, I believe, above rail height, which would mean that sort of with cork and the rails and stuff like that, the platform should be about 17 or 18 millimeters high. Now again, the beauty of this is it's completely up to you, how you split this up. In my case, what I'm going to do in this specific instance is I'm going to extrude, using the extrude command, the entire body, and I'm going to make it 18 millimeters tall. Now what we need to do is make some considerations of how big, obviously, our actual 3D printer is and what we can possibly fit into it. In my case, I have a Bamboo Lab P1S, which has a build volume of 265 millimeters cubes, and so I'm going to make each section about 250 mil in length. There's a few different ways that we can do this specific action, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the top of the platform and I'm going to create a sketch. In this case, I'm going to start just drawing vertical lines, which are going to obviously allow me to split this model up. I'm going to measure from the edge 250 millimeters, and then I'm going to sort of do the same thing from here. What I can do at any point is just check my measurements. So in this case, it's 195 mil. So what I'm going to do, instead of doing another vertical line, I'm going to do a horizontal line here and just cut it off. And you can see we're starting to make different sections that we can use. Down here, I'm going to cut it vertically again. Because of our good work at the start, you can see that this section from end to end is 500 millimeters. So what I can do is drag this line and snap it to the middle point of this line, and now I've got 6 sections of platform that can be then split up. I'm going to exit the sketch, and then I'm going to use the splitting tool to split the platforms into individual bodies. Now you can see up here I've just got one body, but obviously I can't print that all in one go like I said. I'm going to click split body and select body 1, which is the whole platform. Then over here I'm going to select splitting tools, and I'm going to start clicking all the different lines. I'm going to untick, in this case, extend splitting tools. The reason for that is because if you don't untick that, the splitting tools basically grow so they encompass the entire body, but obviously that means that this platform here is going to be cut in 3 different ways, when in reality we only need to cut it once. Once all those are selected, we can hit OK, and you'll now see on the left side that we've got 6 different bodies that have been created. The next thing I'm going to do is make the ramps. To do this, I'm going to switch on demo 1, and I'm going to create a sketch on this face. We're going to start with the ramp at the front here. Instead of looking at it from a 2D perspective, I'm sort of going to angle it up a little bit, and I'm going to select a point which intersects with the end of the ramp. On the canvas image there, you can see that, and I'm just going to constrain that in position. Round it up to 75. Then, taking into consideration the 3D printer and the layer height that we're going to use, I'm going to create an angled line for the actual ramp itself. But I'm actually not going to do it right from one corner. I'm going to do a little lip. I'm going to make this 0.4 millimeters. And the reason for that is obviously that's 2 layers of plastic, which means that the end of your ramp isn't going to be like incredibly thin and flimsy, because of course if we made it 0, if we made it like perfectly pointy, the 3D printer's got to compensate for that, and it's going to just make the end really flimsy and tiny and weak. I'm then going to extrude that shape, and to make it so it's the same width, I'm going to switch it to object and then click that face. Instead of joining it though, I'm going to create a new body, and there's a very good reason for this which I'll show you later on. You'll see now that we have our ramp, and once again the ramp is pretty much the exact size and scale as the real thing. I'm going to repeat the process around the other side. Now this ramp is a bit of an odd shape. This is where sort of a bit of creative liberty comes in. You can see that we've got this sort of like little garden area. It's kind of hard to see, but curved wall. Again, you can make it as accurate or as whatever as you like. But for the purposes of what I'm doing, I'm not going to include this because this is going to be hidden behind my station building. I've only got a small baseboard, so I'm not going to bother with that. Once again, I'm going to click on a flat face. I'm going to come down and I'm going to actually project this face by using P, so I can actually draw on that as well. And in this case, a bit of, again, creative liberty. I'm going to just select roughly here to be the end of my ramp, even though it's down here, but we're not going to go too crazy with it. And again, I'm just going to mark and constrain that position. I'm then going to draw my angled line, and then I'm going to make that 0.4 millimeters. Once again, I'll extrude those 2 points. So I'm going to try and click onto that point there. That worked. You can click a point and it'll sort of grow out to that. And once again, I'm going to make it a new body instead. So things are starting to come together. It's looking pretty good. The next thing I'm going to do before we start adding some detail is I'm going to place the second image that we snipped earlier so I can produce a ramp. Now, of course, once again, you can extend this by however much you want. You can make your your platforms really long if you want. What I'm going to do in this case is, and even though it's not accurate, I'm actually going to model the ramp right here, because then of course I can extend and add as many sections as I want later on, but it doesn't matter if I make the ramp right here. In this case, I'm going to click insert canvas and I'm going to add in demo 2. To move it into position, I'm going to right click on Demo 2 and press Edit Canvas, rotate it round, move it into position, and there we go. In this case, what I'm going to do is click on this front face, and I'm going to sort of repeat the same process I did for the other ramps. I'm going to draw a line, and I'm going to constrain it to be maybe 90. You can see coincides with the end of the ramp down here. So I'm actually going to make the lip about 1 mil, because obviously this is not for someone with a wheelchair to roll up. It doesn't have to be sort of perfectly flat to the floor. And then I'm going to draw an angled line up to this top corner, and now I can extrude the ramp. Once again, creating a new body. The same thing's going to apply for here, but instead of sort of faffing around like, you know, recalibrating and getting another snip, I'm just going to basically replicate this exact design over here. And the easiest way to do that is to come to body 9, Control C, Control V, and that's basically made a copy of that. I'm going to come to point, instead of free move, I'm going to go point to point, and I'm going to move this top corner of the ramp and make it move. You can see the blue line that connects there to the other side. Now of course this isn't the right size, but it's a very easy fix. We can just hit extrude, click that face up to there. What I've done accidentally is joined that to the previous section. So what we're going to do is switch off that section so it's not touching, and then we want to make sure it says join, so we join the extended part onto that. So now effectively we've got a shortened version of Bourne End platforms ready to go. If you're happy with this and you want to add your own detailing and stuff like that, then you can just print it as is. The nice thing is we can always go back at any point, and we can change this extrusion if we need to change the height of it, and it will update all of the stuff that we've done after that. But here we're going to add some fine detailing points. Underneath, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a sketch on one of the flat sections first. So I've projected all of the inside lines, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab the line tool, come down to here, and I'm going to basically make a very rough outline along all of the edges. We're going to take this line all the way to the end. We use some of the constraints to make sure that the lines are all either horizontal or vertical, and then we're going to use the dimension tool to make sure that they're about 2 millimeters away from each edge. Now that I've created that, what I can do is I can come down to here, making sure that my sketch is closed, so I can select it all the way around. And then, because I know it's 18 millimeters tall, I'm going to extrude it down 16 mil. Now you can see that I've got a nice lip around the edge of the platform. Now this is useful obviously for that extra detail, meaning you don't have to add it later, but also it adds a little recess where we could fit some brick paneling or anything like that underneath there. Again, you can make it as deep as you like, because of course, you know, it depends what brick paneling or detail parts you want to add there. For the ramps, all we're going to do is basically create a sketch on this bottom surface, and now we've already made one, we can basically utilize the lines we already made, and we can draw a line all the way to the end. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to extrude this up to surface with an offset of -2. What you'll see then is that basically the extrusion moves up but stops 2 millimeters away from the slip surface, meaning our lip goes all the way to the edge, which is really nice. I'm going to repeat the same process on the other side. So as it stands there, you could 3D print all of these sections if you want. And that is, you know, super simple, I would argue, relatively speaking. It's only a few sketch commands and extrusions to make all of this. And again, if we switch back on our canvas, we can see that this is very accurately recreating Bourne End Station. If I wanted to make a new section, say, of this platform, without having to faff around, all I could do is switch off the ramp, click this face, press extrude, and type in 250. And then press new body, and you can see now that I've got even another longer section on there. To save some material, what I'm going to do for all of these sections is I'm going to hollow them out and add some ribs inside as if they were injection molders, as you might find on common off-the-shelf station platform kits. Flipping the whole model upside down, I'm going to demonstrate how we can do this just on one section, just to save time. I'm going to make it this complicated shape here because it's really easy to do. I'm going to click on this face underneath and I'm going to press shell. I'm going to make the shell about 2mm, so I've got 2mm of material all around inside. So basically this whole thing is hollow. Now again, we could just print this if we want, but I would be concerned about some of the structural rigidity inside. I'm then going to make sure I click this top edge which goes around the whole thing, and I'm going to start a sketch on that surface. I'm then going to grab the line tool, and all I need to do is make some simple lines all the way over the model. So I'm going to go do a little cross in the middle, and again this is completely up to you. Sometimes maybe I go a bit overboard with making these ribs and stuff like that, but ultimately if you want it to be super strong but save material at the same time, then of course you can add as many as you want. But any lines you don't want to turn into a rib, you need to click on and press X, which turns them into a construction line. To trim this up, we can just do the trim tool with these pair of scissors here, and then click the extra bits that we obviously don't want. Now you can see basically I have 3 vertical lines and 1 horizontal. I can come to solid, create, web, and then I can click all of these lines. I'm going to make the dimension 2mm, and you can play around with some of these different settings if you want to. But to next basically means that from the point at which the sketch is present, it will grow down to the next surface it touches. Extend curves means that basically it will extend the end of the line until it touches a flat surface, which in this case is here. So it obviously doesn't overshoot or doesn't undershoot. I can now press OK. Now what I've got is this body here. You can compare that to the other ones. Obviously the 3D printer will print it with infill anyway, but it will save time in printing by adding these ribs in here and make the whole thing lighter, but also keeping it nice and strong. The same thing applies to the ramp sections if you wanted to do that. The nice thing about Fusion is it remembers the commands and settings we set last time, so it's automatically assumed I wanted them to be 2mm as they were before. I'm now going to demonstrate how we can set this up for 3D printing and some of the advantages that we can have by using a 3D printer with a textured build plate as is default with Bambu Lab printers. To export this for 3D printing, we can click on the body we want to, say for example body 4, right click and save as mesh. We want to make sure we've got it set to STL, the units are correct, and then we can hit OK. I'm just going to call this demo 1, and I'm going to do the same thing with the ramp. I'm just going to call it demo 2. I'm going to open up Bambu Studio now, which is the slicer that obviously I use for my 3D printing. In Bambu Studio you're going to hit add, and I'm just going to open up both of these files here. One of the things that we need to do is ensure we're printing the ramp, for example, the right way up, because obviously all of this area under here is going to require support material if you print it the wrong way. I'm going to change these to this grey colour so they're easier to see. Of course you can print them in whatever colour you want, but you'll see in a minute that I print them in grey because again reduces the amount of work I might have to do later. We can click our part, and then the best thing to do is come up to lay on face, or you can hit F on the keyboard and select the top face. Same thing with the ramp, which is even better. If you select the sloping face, it'll flip it so that is laid perfectly on the build plate. I'm then going to hit arrange, so it's going to basically put both parts inside the build volume. So what you'll notice is in fact we're printing these parts upside down. Now 2 advantages, like I said. If you have a textured build plate, it'll add the texture to that top surface, which is what I wanted. But also it means we can print it hollow like this, and this lip here that we've added is not going to require any support material. We'll hit slice and it'll apply the settings that we've set up over here, and obviously you can play around with those as you want. But in this case you can see that basically everything is made up of solid lines apart from this little section of infill inside there. In my experience it's made super strong platforms that are also very lightweight. Now it's time to get into some printing so you can enjoy a couple of little time lapses. So the prints are all done, and you can see here the benefit of that textured build plate, adding that realistic surface to it, something we don't have to add later. Okay, so we have all of our pieces here, which is really exciting. There's one I've made earlier because I've already sort of done some experimentation. But I'm just going to show you how I'm going to glue this up, and then we'll see the final result. I would recommend quite honestly, at least until you've got like a very definitive layout in mind and you're happy with everything, not to glue all the sections together. I would probably stick to maybe 3 individual sections being stuck together and then join them all at a later date when you're ready to make things more permanent. What I've found, especially with this, is that I glued a load of them up, and you can actually see that with this one I made earlier here. I had to break them off. But in fact, I've changed the design of this piece for my specific layout. I've made it a bit shorter, but I can't physically break these apart now. So I would definitely recommend not gluing the whole structure together, because obviously if you need to make a change, then you're going to be a bit screwed. So in this specific case, I've got the CAD model open on my screen over there for reference, and I'm going to glue this section of platform and this ramp together. Now to do this, what you're going to need is some of these little clamps, which are very super useful and are also very cheap, and some nice simple super glue. The benefit also of creating these ribs, as I showed you earlier, makes it really easy to glue these different sections up, because we can sort of clamp them from the underside, as you can see here. So I'm going to go ahead and add some glue to one of the sections. If you want to speed the process up, you can use a bit of super glue activator, but I wouldn't worry too much about that, because in my experience it's worked really well. But again, it depends on what your process typically is. I'm not going to go overboard, because again, just in case I ever have to break these apart, then it makes my life a bit easier. I'm going to make sure that they're very nicely lined up, and I'm going to sort of just pin them in place and I'm going to run my thumb across the top edge, because what I want is a really nice smooth transition. This is a fiddly job, but I'm going to try and pin them with my fingers so that all of the faces that we can see are nice and smooth. And then I'm going to grab my clamp and I'm going to chuck that straight on there. Now, sometimes with super glue you have a little bit of working time, but not very much. So if you know someone who wants to be super specific about it, then I would advise a different, maybe a 5-minute epoxy or something like that, so you have a bit more working time. But honestly, with this, now these are clamped in, they're not sticking together straight away, but I've got the clamps on there and I'm running my thumb across this top transition to make sure it's nice and smooth, and then also down the edges. Now that is being pinned together really nicely by those clamps, and again, that's like I said, the benefit of doing those ribs inside makes things super easy to glue up. And I'm just going to lay this down over here to dry. So I'm going to repeat that process, and I'm going to glue the rest of these up, and then I'll show you the end result. So here we are, finally at the end. You can see I've already got this first section in place, which is one that I had done earlier. You can see the structure underneath there. And the idea with that is going to sit right at the back of the baseboard. So that's going to be basically dictating obviously where the track is fixed. This piece of track is already fixed down because I already measured it based off of that. The second piece we have is the longest one, which is 3 long sections. You can see the sort of joins there and the structure underneath. And this one actually has the ramp here. Now in the video I showed the ramp being on the outside. In this case I decided to actually modify the design so the ramp was on the inside to give me more space on the baseboard. You can see down here I don't have lots of space between the front of the baseboard and the platform, and I'd love to have some sort of detailing here. So I decided to modify a bit and have the ramp there, and I'm going to have a fence that sort of goes around here so people obviously can't fall off down there, because that wouldn't be very health and safety. And then the last piece is this one, which is made of 3 sections, 1, 2, 3. You see the structure again, and obviously this joins nicely onto here. Now I think maybe in the end, when I'm ready to I'm confident that's the final design and whatever, I'll glue the whole thing together, because there's a few bits like here that doesn't really sit well together. But that's basically the layout of the platforms and the station at Bourne End, but obviously in 00 gauge. I'm really pleased with that. This back area around here will have some maybe industrial buildings, or even maybe like implications of a field or something, I'm not sure yet. But I am really, really happy with this. Platform number 1, which is here, is servicing mainly 2 car trains, 2 carriage trains, so a 2-car DMU, and then this platform number 2 is going to be a longer train, so 3-car DMU, 3-car train, something, or 3 carriage train, something like that. And then we've obviously got the points over here somewhere that are going to obviously join these 2 tracks together. The reason this platform is shorter is because on the real Bourne End railway, which I'll show on screen now from the satellite view, we've got a set of points around here which curve off towards Marlow. And because in real life the train comes from Maidenhead along the main line into Bourne End, off to Marlow, and then back to Bourne End, then back to Maidenhead, which is quite unique and interesting. So I'm going to have a point there which goes off obviously into the wall, but it's going to imply that the train goes off there. So it's going to be interesting to figure out how I can make that look good on the layout. I want to thank you for watching the video. I really appreciate your time, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please consider subscribing. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on everything here. If you've got any suggestions, then please leave them in the comments down below. And if you use my process to make platforms of your own based on a station, one that you want to model, I'd love to see the end result. So please send me some pictures. If you've got any questions about the process as well, again, let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching.